My name is Spencer Barron, and this is for my Advanced Teaching Methods of Individuals with Significant Disabilities class. This is a kindergarten ELA lesson plan on story elements. The overall objectives of this lesson is for my students to be able to identify 3 out of 4 characters from a given text and to identify 2 out of 3 settings from a given text. For my focused learner, he'll have similar goals of identifying 3 out of 4 characters from a given text and identifying 2 out of 3 settings from a given text. However, he'll complete these goals using a LAMP-assisted device. To start this lesson, I will have all of my students come to the kidney table. For my focused learner, he'll have an aide with him to assist him and keep him on topic and keep him focused throughout the lesson. I will activate my students' prior knowledge and make connections to this lesson by asking them what are their favorite stories. Who are the people and the animals that star in these stories? Where do they take place? Things like that. At that point, I will then state the objectives to my students and tell them that by the end of this lesson, they will be able to identify 3 out of 4 characters from a given text and 2 out of 3 of the settings from this text. At that point, I will ask my students to recall what they know about characters. What is a character to them? What do they know about characters? Things like that. At that point, we will watch a video on what a character is. This way they have a visual and audio component of learning as well. At that point, we will then do the same thing for setting. I'll ask them, what is setting? What do you know about setting? What is setting to you? And then we'll follow that up as well with a video on what is setting. Again, having that audio-visual component as well of the lesson. After that, we will review the essential vocabulary for this lesson. Story elements. What are characters? What is setting? At that point, I will read the story of the 3 Billy Goats Gruff to my students. While we read it, I will stop and pause at certain points so that they'll have a chance to identify the characters and settings that they see within the story. They will have story element cards that they will be able to hold up and use while they read, or while it's read to them. For my focused learner, he'll have larger cards just to help him see and identify them. Things like it took place under a bridge or in the mountains. There was a troll in a story, or the goat. He was in the story as well. After completing that, I'll ask my students, after we finish the story, to recall some of the characters from the story, praising them for their correct answers, and what were some of the settings that they recall from the story. Again, praising them for their correct answers. If they need some assistance, I will pull up the cards and be like, let's look at this one. What's this in the story? What about this one? How about this guy? Was he in the story? That way that even if they weren't able to get it, now they have an example of what was within the story. At that point, we will reread the story, although this time I will have them focus, tell them pay a lot of attention, because after this we will do a coloring sheet as an assessment. That way I know what you guys know, so you need to be careful and listen. That way you remember and you can show me what you know. So after reading the story again, I will hand out the coloring sheets where I will have them color in just the animals that were, or just the characters that were within the story. That's the goats and the troll. They wouldn't color the chicken, the wolf, the pig, things like that. For the setting as well, I will have them only color in what settings were in the story. That would be the bridge, the mountains, the valley, or the meadow, none of the 3 little pigs' houses. While that's going on, the aide will take my focused learner to the side in a quiet area and use an assessment checklist for him. While he uses lamps, he will identify characters and settings within the story. As he lets her know, or him, the aide, know what characters were in the story and what settings were, they'll be checked off on the assessment list. That way later we can go back and know what he knew, what he didn't know. After that, I'll have everyone come back to the table where we'll review the objectives, and I'll let the students know that now that we've completed this lesson, you should be able to identify 3 out of 4 characters from this story and identify 2 out of 3 settings from this story. then I'll have them recall, just to review, what are the story elements? What is a character? What is a setting? After that, we'll transition into whatever we have next in our schedule. For some students, that may be speech, OTPT. For others, it may be that we just take a brain break. We may go do a go noodle or go outside for recess. So, to review some of the materials from this lesson, we have the text, the Three Billy Goats Gruff. We have the character and setting videos, which were audio and visual aids to help the students become more familiar with character and setting, that were shown from my laptop and was projected onto the Promethean board. The story element cards are what the students used while reading the story as a way of identifying the characters and the settings from within the story. For my focused learner, he has lamps as well, which gives him phrases, words, pictures as a way to identify, in this case, characters and settings from the story for this lesson. The coloring sheet for assessing my students on what they know and don't know, what characters, what settings they know, and for my focused learner, we have the assessment checklist, which was used to check off what he knew, what he didn't know. The benefits for this lesson are that my students will be able to understand stories much easier now. So now that they know what a character is, what they know what the settings are, later on when they go back and read other stories, they'll be able to identify what a character is in this story, who the character is in this story, and what are the settings, where did the story take place. That way, every time we read a story, we don't have to go back and reestablish every time what is a character, what is a setting, things like that. For my focused learner, in addition to that, he's also had time to practice and communicate using lamps, becoming more familiar with it. That way he continues to progress and knows how to use it. The data from this lesson. Looking at the data, we'll know whether they knew the characters, whether they knew the settings, and if my students, if I need to reteach this lesson, if they don't have a handle on it yet, and if they do, there's no need to continue on this lesson if they already knew it. We can move on, teach something else. And for my focused learner, again, in addition to that, he will know how well he's using his communication device. Is he understanding this? Do we need to move on to bigger words, phrases, sentences even, or do we need to kind of dial it back and focus on getting him used to using this device and familiarity with it? Thank you.